In the shadowy underbelly of the American dream, where crime met desire, there emerged a figure whose story is as captivating as it is controversial. In this video, we delve into the life of an enigmatic maestro who orchestrated and ruled the U.S. adult entertainment industry like no other. Brace yourselves for an unforgettable moment, one that will keep you on the edge of your seats as we delve into the mesmerizing world of Robert DiBernardo, the mobster who ruled the U.S. porn industry. Early background and rise to power. From his humble beginnings on the tough streets of New York City to his rise as a prominent figure in the adult entertainment business, Robert DiBernardo's story is one that will leave you astounded. DiBernardo, born on May 31, 1937, grew up in the gritty streets of Hewlett, Long Island, New York City. From a young age, he was drawn to a life of crime and money, finding himself entangled with the notorious Gambino crime family. But it was in the world of pornography DiBernardo would truly make his mark. Known as one of the most influential and important mobsters linked to the mafia without a murder to his name, DiBernardo was a well-known name during the 1970s and 1980s. Just before he became known for flooding Times Square with all types of adult entertainment videos, DiBernardo worked closely with the Cavalcante crime family in the 1960s. In case you are new to the world of famous mafia crime families, the Cavalcante crime family, also known as the North Jersey Mafia or North Jersey crime family, is an Italian-American mafia organized crime family. The powerful crime family operates in several illicit activities, which include fraud, bootlegging, drug trafficking, prostitution, extortion, money laundering, loan sharking, racketeering, pornography, hijacking, and many other illegal acts. The Cavalcante crime family is part of the nationwide criminal network popularly known as the American Mafia. It operates on the opposite side of the Hudson River, differently from the five families of New York, with its tentacles spread around northern New Jersey, West New York, Newark, and the surrounding areas in North Jersey. The Cavalcantes are considered the sixth family. Backed by these powerful crime families, it was little wonder how DiBernardo was able to gather the means to purchase the softcore business Star Distributors in the late 1960s. Star Distributors, a magazine distribution company, was previously owned by a man named Theodore Ted Rothstein. It operated as far back as 1948 in Brooklyn, specializing in niche trade publications. In the beginning, Star Distributors was doing reasonably well until other richer companies emerged, pushing the company to the background. Ted, who had taken over the company in the early 1960s, had plans of taking it back to its glory days by distributing risque, softcore pinup magazines, but it was difficult for Star Distributors to gain a foothold in the industry. That was the moment the then 28-year-old Italian-American Robert DiBernardo, also known as Di-B, stepped into the scene. Known as a polished operator who was well connected with organized crime connections, he had what it took to turn Star Distributors around. DiBernardo approached Ted with an offer. He could stay on as the company's president, but DiBernardo would become the vice president, principal financier, and most importantly, have the last words on significant issues relating to Star Distributors. Ted had no other option than to accept the offer, and that was when DiBernardo made his first and most important decision. Star Distributors was going to switch its focus to hardcore sexual content. Not long after, he started to import pornographic films from the Netherlands and Denmark and sell these hardcore media to adult industry businesses around Times Square. Just as Star Distributors was starting to gain significant control of the U.S. porn industry, that was when DiBernardo switched his allegiance from the Cavalcantes to the Gambino crime family through his connection with fellow pornographer and Gambino capo, Ettore Zappi. It is allegedly that it was Zappi who sponsored DiBernardo to become a member of the Gambino family. It would be a bit of an injustice if I didn't try to explain just how powerful the Gambino crime family is and why DiBernardo was willing to be associated with them. The Gambino crime family, also an Italian-American mafia crime family, was and is still regarded as one of the big five families that rule the organized crime scene in New York. The Gambino family does not just operate in New York. Their activities even extend as far as California. Like every other crime syndicate, the Gambino family is heavily engaged in labor and construction racketeering, prostitution, money laundering, loan sharking, extortion, fencing, hijacking, and so much more. Again, the U.S. porn industry where DiBernardo was operating was one that was closely linked with organized crime syndicates, so it was important to him that he was associated with some of the most powerful mafia crime families to dissuade any form of competition. However, DiBernardo, even though associated with the American Mafia, was generally not one that was prone to violence. He had no crew to do his dirty bidding or back him up when needed. In any event, DiBernardo was a relatively smart businessman who was careful enough to not have a personal reputation for violence despite his affiliation with the Mafia. He worked as a lone operator, which easily set him apart from other wise guys. Though a mobster, DiBernardo ensured he wasn't deeply involved in the activities of the Mafia, which made it easy for him to enjoy a special status where he didn't need to report to a capo. Even though he was just starting as a pornographer in the U.S. porn industry, his affiliation with these powerful crime families ensured he was able to bring in substantial profits. Due to this, he was able to rise from the rank of a soldier in the Gambino crime family to the status of a captain later on in his career. By the 1970s, DiBernardo was becoming a well-known name in the U.S. porn industry, and his reputation as a prominent dealer in pornography was quickly spreading. His enterprise, Star Distributors, was also becoming one of the largest pornography operations in the United States. With his connections and business acumen, DiBernardo decided that it was time to expand his empire beyond the United States. This was the moment he decided to make his entry into the global adult entertainment industry by forming an alliance many in the business didn't see coming. Entry into the adult entertainment industry. Before DiBernardo's venture into the U.S. porn industry, American adult magazines were all the rage and had the widest distribution since they could be legally distributed. By the 1960s, this particular niche was thriving, and adult magazines were put into the mainstream by the pioneer Playboy. Soon after, other magazines like Pubic Wars and Penthouse became more prominent as more sexually explicit magazines. However, Screw moved the bar toward hardcore, becoming the largest of these publications. By now, organized crime syndicates were beginning to see the gold mine that existed in the porn industry. Hence, most major hardcore pornographic magazines and newspapers in the United States were distributed by companies controlled by organized crime members, according to law enforcement officials and media reports. However, the spread of these publications couldn't have been possible without distributors. That was where Robert DiBernardo came in. Star Distributors alongside Astro News were the two chief distributors of pornographic content in the nation. Both Star and Astro had mafia ties, with the Gambinos controlling Star and the Colombo family, another of the Big Five families, specifically the Gallo brothers, controlling Astro. According to a Colombo defector, the Genovese crime family, specifically Vincent Chin Gigante, backed the Gallo brothers in the porn business. However, Star Distributors was easily the most popular of the two because it had one of the most lucrative clients in the sex business, which was Screw Magazine, an explicit magazine founded in 1968. Screw Magazine was run by a couple of censorship-challenging upstarts, Al Goldstein and Jim Buckley, who freely admitted that their content was distributed by a mob-controlled company like Star, but insisted it was the only way to make sales as they had no other options. When Screw was first published, distributors and operators of newsstands refused to handle the paper out of fear that they would be arrested on obscenity charges, Buckley said. It's the law that forced us into mafia distribution. This was also the period when the sex business was booming. It is almost impossible to talk about the United States porn industry without mentioning the golden age of porn era and the role it played in the industry's evolution. This refers to 15 years in commercial American pornography, where sexually explicit films experienced positive attention from mainstream cinemas, movie critics, and the general public. This period, which began on June 12, 1969, with the theatrical release of the film Blue Movie, which was directed by Andy Warhol, caused quite a stir. Soon after, the 1970 film Mona was released, and this marked the golden age of porn era as many producers in the U.S. started to produce adult erotic films depicting explicit sex scenes just so they could receive a wide theatrical release and reception. Many of these adult erotic films were low-budget productions, but due to their wide theatrical release, they raked in profits that made it extremely competitive with Hollywood films. Seeing the potential hidden in this, DiBernardo decided it was time to venture into the adult film industry. DiBernardo, now recognized as a prominent pornographic dealer who had grown so much momentum, began to directly commission the production of much of the so-called golden age of porn era hardcore films made in New York. This was also the moment he decided to have a working relationship with Reuben Sterman, who was the United States' largest porn seller. Sterman, who was also referred to as the Walt Disney of porn, was a well-known American pornographer and businessman in Ohio who co-founded the sex toys company Doc Johnson. He was popular in the U.S. adult industry and was even a subject in Eric Schlosser's 203 book on underground economies titled Reefer Madness, Sex, Drugs, and Cheap Labor in the American Black Market. Sterman started out selling comic books from his car in 1948 upon graduation. By the 1960s, Sterman had expanded his business to include selling magazines with sexual content, as he discovered these raked in more profits that surpassed anything he had ever gotten from selling comic books. By the late 1960s, Sterman had risen to become the largest porn seller in the United States. Robert DiBernardo, who was always out for profits, saw a collaboration with Sterman as a perfect opportunity to make more money, and the two went on to control the U.S. porn industry on a global level. The rapid growth of the adult adult entertainment industry during this period was heavily influenced by different factors. For one, the bulk of the industry's customers were businessmen, white-collar and blue-collar workers alongside the middle class. These people had the funds to spare, so purchasing these pornographic content regularly wasn't a problem at all. Pornography was also good business for DiBernardo because the majority of his consumers were lonely, sexually frustrated men who often used its content to stimulate themselves and have the ultimate release. There were also consumers who consumed this pornographic content as a way of spicing up their relationships or marriages. Young people, especially teenagers, also constituted a huge part of this pornographic content. Therefore, DiBernardo was sure to record high sales since this erotic content was always in demand. Influence and control. From his involvement in the Gambino crime family to his alliance with Ruben Sturman, the largest U.S. porn seller, DiBernardo's rise to dominance was fueled by his cunning and nose for profitable ventures. In the 1970s, as the sexual revolution swept across the nation, the U.S. porn industry experienced a boom like never before. With his connections to the mafia, DiBernardo quickly established himself as a force to be reckoned with. DiBernardo's criminal connections provided him with the muscle and protection needed to navigate the treacherous waters of the industry. DiBernardo was a shrewd businessman, always one step ahead of the game. He knew how to leverage his connections and make things happen. He had a knack for spotting trends and capitalizing on them. It was a pleasure doing business with him. DiBernardo's influence extended far beyond the boardrooms and backrooms of the industry. He had a keen eye for talent and was known for discovering and partnering with influential pornographers and figures in the sex business. Another major source of revenue was on Starr's doorstep in Times Square. At the time, Times Square was deemed an area where even the police couldn't prevent the flouting of obscenity law, which made it the perfect spot for a multitude of sex trafficking businesses. Ever on the lookout for a business opportunity, DiBernardo decided it was the perfect area for what would eventually be known as their most notable outlet, which was the Show World at 668 8th Avenue. The brain behind Show World was Richard Carnello Basciano, who was a fellow pornographer who was into real estate and the sex business. DiBernardo partnered with Basciano, and Show World became a famous Times Square porn palace. Described as the flagship of the sex industry of New York, Show World was a 22,000 square foot den opened in 1975. The outlet reputedly cost $40,000 in construction, but both Basciano and DiBernardo were able to recover their monies quickly as they had nearly 100 women who worked a rotating peep show every day. Show World was highly sought after as the acts included couples simulating copulation on stage, as well as adult film stars who were always around to perform. It also featured XXX fare to sate every desire. DiBernardo was raking in thousands of dollars from just this venture. Under DiB and Ted's guidance, Star Distributors became a multi-million-dollar sex empire conglomerate, even branching out nationwide and taking controlling interests in other sex industry companies. The company also expanding their scope to distributing sexual devices and dirty books and controlling the bookstores, movie theaters, and publishing houses that it supplied to. But DiBernardo's involvement in the U.S. porn industry wasn't without controversy. Unlike some pornographers who shunned the limelight, DiBernardo didn't hide the fact that he was involved in the sex business. He didn't see the need to hide behind a middleman or a series of innocuous shell companies. DiBernardo conducted his business openly. In fact, he regularly drove between his suburban home on Long Island and Star Distributors' downtown Manhattan offices at 150 Lafayette Street in his 1972 Mercedes-Benz with personalized number plates. His mob connections were also known to all. At one point, he was even caught by FBI bugs telling another pornography magnate, Michael Thievis, that the family was in charge of all of his businesses. Despite all of these being out in the open, DiBernardo was one of those few businessmen thought to have become a made man in the mafia without committing a murder. He didn't have to employ dirty or brutal tactics to exert his dominance in the adult entertainment industry. However, since his mafia ties were public, many feared being in his bad books, so he had relatively few competitors, coupled with the fact that he had connections with other well-known pornographers. Despite the scrutiny, DiBernardo continued to expand his empire, amassing wealth and power within the industry. In fact, he was perceived by many as a phenomenal moneymaker and was even described by a journalist in 1977 as packing an unparalleled reputation as a tough-minded, competent, and shrewd businessman. He was smart enough to cultivate a mainstream image as well, and also diversified into investments such as automotive repair franchises, a car wash, pinball arcades, and several mainstream media distribution firms. His ability to navigate the treacherous waters of the mafia while maintaining control over his empire was a testament to his cunning and resourcefulness. The secrecy surrounding DiBernardo's operations also added to his mystique, making him a figure of intrigue and fascination within the underworld. His reputation as a powerful and enigmatic figure in the porn industry and the mafia solidified his status as a force to be reckoned with. However, DiBernardo's reign of control would come to a crashing halt when he became the target of a federal investigation into child pornography. The charges were damning, and his empire began to crumble, legal troubles and downfall. In the late 1980s, as the U.S. government cracked down on the adult entertainment industry, DiBernardo found himself under investigation for his alleged involvement in distributing obscene materials. While DiBernardo was the very picture of a successful businessman, Star Distributors' high profile made him and Ted easy targets when the FBI began an undercover investigation of all major publishers and distributors of adult films and magazines throughout the United States in 1977. Termed My Porn and based in Miami, the operation was aimed at cracking the nationwide conspiracy controlling the multi-billion-dollar pornography industry. The original base of operations was a warehouse called Goldie Coast Specialties Inc., which was made to appear like a mail-order house dealing exclusively in pornographic material. Two undercover agents were tasked with infiltrating the pornography industry and had to travel all over the country to meet the key players in the industry. DiBernardo and Ted were part of the 45 people targeted, arrested, and charged with interstate transportation of obscene materials. However, the investigation singled out 4 men who the FBI said were the major traffickers in dirty books and movies. These were Reuben Sturman of Cleveland, Michael Mickey Zaffarano, and Robert D.B. DiBernardo from New York, both described as organized crime figures, and Harry Mauney of Durand, Michigan. The indictments were described by federal law enforcement officials as the largest single attack on the U.S. pornography industry. According to a top official, "We feel we've knocked out the entire major production and distribution chain in an organized, crime-controlled industry." It didn't help that Michael Mickey Zaffarano, a Bonanno crime family capo, suddenly died of a fatal heart attack, just as the FBI were serving a warrant for his arrest at his Times Square adult movie theater on February 14, 1980. DiBernardo and Ted Rothstein were both convicted of conspiracy, transporting obscene materials for sale and distribution, as well as 3 counts of using a common carrier to transport obscene materials across state lines on June 12, 1981. Both men were sentenced to 5 years in prison. Fortunately for DiBernardo and Rothstein, a federal judge overturned their conviction on grounds that one of the 2 undercover agents, FBI agent Patrick Livingston, who had posed as a dealer of adult materials, may have lied to the grand jury. He was arrested for shoplifting a sweater at a department store in November 1981, and there was evidence that he had been experiencing a psychiatric problem that hampered his ability to distinguish between his real and undercover identities. Therefore, his testimony in the case against DiBernardo and Rothstein was deemed highly unreliable. With the case dismissed, both men were free to go back to work. However, this wasn't the end of DiBernardo's troubles. First, he later became the target of a federal investigation after it was revealed that he may have been involved in child pornography. Also, following his success over 2 decades, he started to become caught up in power play politics. Even though DiBernardo was recognized as an organized crime figure, he only became widely known after he was embroiled in a scandal involving a 1984 Democratic candidate for the United States Vice President. Geraldine Ferraro, who was chosen for the ticket, ran into a problem when her personal finances, as well as that of her real estate developer husband John Zaccaro, were up for scrutiny. It then emerged that DiBernardo, an organized crime member, had rented his premises from Zaccaro's company, and this heavily affected Ferraro's ticket. Aside from this, DiBernardo became associated with John Joseph Gotti Jr., an American gangster who had aspirations of becoming the boss of the Gambino crime family. DiBernardo was one of the first to express his support when John Gotti revealed his plot to murder the then Gambino boss Paul Castellano and take over. It was alleged that DiBernardo on several occasions had complained that he got little respect from Castellano. He claimed Castellano despised the porn business, but often took a huge percentage of the profits anyway. In December 1885, Gotti finally orchestrated the murder of Castellano and took over as the boss of the Gambino crime family. DiBernardo was then rewarded with the status of a captain, despite not having a crew of his own. Aside from his affiliation affiliation with John Gotti, DiBernardo was also associated with mob underboss Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano. Gravano was originally an associate of the Colombo crime family who switched to being a member of the Gambino crime family after he was part of the group that conspired to murder Castellano. At the time, DiBernardo saw these affiliations as nothing but a partnership between organized crime members. Unfortunately, these same men would be responsible for his untimely demise. In 1986, Gotti was imprisoned for racketeering, and only one mafia member, which was his friend Angelo Ruggiero, was allowed to see him in jail. According to Sammy Gravano, Ruggiero had come back from one of his visits, saying that Gotti wanted DiBernardo murdered for seeking to overthrow him. In his memoir, Gravano stated that he was reluctant to obey Gotti's command because it was hard to understand how DiBernardo, who had no crew needed for any form of power play, could have wanted to overthrow Gotti's leadership.
He was a good guy, very wealthy. A good guy all the way around. Like I said earlier, he wasn't a tough guy. He was no threat to anything. I can't, till today, imagine why.
However, he believed Ruggiero wouldn't have fabricated the instructions, so Gravano decided to obey the boss's order without questions.
I never do when it comes to stuff like that, of where and what. It's really, that's not my job. My job was to kill. So, this was the end of DB.
He then arranged for DiBernardo's murder.
I start talking with him. Joe walks over, opens up the cabinet, goes in there, takes the gun, walks across the floor, and shoots him the first shot in the back of the head.
On the evening of June 5, 1986, DiBernardo was on his way home from Star Distributor's office to take his family out when he was lured to the basement offices of Gravano's drywall company on Stillwell Avenue in Brooklyn. The setting was disguised as though it was a regular business meeting, and Gravano had asked Joseph Peruta, who acted as a soldier within the Gambino crime family, to get DiBernardo a cup of coffee. However, Peruta took a .380 with a silencer from a cabinet behind DiBernardo and shot him in the back of the head. DiBernardo's body was never found. That marked the end of an era for the most powerful figure in the U.S. pornography industry, legacy, and impact. Even though DiBernardo was no longer around to manage Star Distributors, the business that he had perfected over the years was now too big to fail. Ted Rothstein was able to make profits off the company despite not having DIB's closely guarded knowledge. He moved the Star offices into a single 40,000-foot location at 2040 J Street in Brooklyn. He also expanded the business, and by the 2000s, Star Distributors was divided into 3 additional parts, which included Bizarre Video, which focused on adult films, Media Distributors, which distributed newspapers, and Novelties by Naswalk, which focused on the sale of sex toys. By the 2010s, however, the fortune of the pornography industry had started to change. Competition from pirates and low-cost professional content readily available on the internet for streaming reduces the otherwise profitable DVD sales of adult films and erotic magazines, leading to a reduction in profits. Even though Star Distributors, like other adult film companies, became less profitable, there was no denying that Robert DiBernardo had left his mark by changing the game of pornography business. The fact that he was unashamed of his role in the adult porn industry was another reason why people began to see the U.S. adult entertainment scene differently. Unfortunately, his involvement with the mafia was the beginning and end of him. Even now, organized crime families and the mafia are still heavily involved in the pornography industry. The world of adult entertainment has always been a captivating enigma, but what if I told you that there's a hidden story lurking beneath the surface? From the rise of key players like Robert DiBernardo and Michael Zaffarano to the dangerous undercover operation launched by the FBI, organized crime families ruled this industry. To understand this, we need to go back to where it all started. In the 1960s and 1970s, a cultural revolution was underway. The sexual revolution, as it was called, swept across the nation, challenging societal norms and pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable. It was during this time that the adult entertainment industry experienced an explosive emergence, forever changing the landscape of entertainment. But what many don't know is that behind the scenes, hidden from the public eye, the mafia played a crucial role in the production and distribution of these X-rated movies. The stage was set for the mafia's entry into the world of adult entertainment. For years, they had been quietly producing stag films, catering to a niche market of individuals seeking explicit content. These films, characterized by their focus on sexual acts and nudity, were often shown in private settings, away from prying eyes. However, it wasn't until 1971 that the mafia's involvement in the adult entertainment industry took a dramatic turn. Associates of the Colombo organization struck gold with an X-rated comedy titled Deep Throat that became a massive success, raking in an astonishing $50 million in profit. This windfall attracted the attention of other mobsters, who saw the potential for immense wealth in this burgeoning industry. One such mobster was Robert DiBernardo, a man who presented himself as more of a Wall Street broker than a smut-peddling thug. DiBernardo saw an opportunity to capitalize on the growing demand for adult content and establish Star Distributors, which quickly became the main supplier of pornography in New York City. DiBernardo's control, Star Distributors became a powerful force in the industry, bringing together various pornographers under the umbrella of the mob. This consolidation of power allowed the mafia to exert control over the production, distribution, and profits of X-rated movies. Another key player in the mafia's grip on the adult entertainment industry was Michael Zaffarano. Zaffarano served as the main contact between the mob and the porn industry, often mediating disputes between different mafia families over the production of X-rated movies. His influence extended far and wide, ensuring that the mafia maintained a firm grip on the industry. As the mafia's involvement in the pornography industry grew, so did the profits. The demand for X-rated movies skyrocketed, with audiences hungry for more explicit content. The mobsters saw an opportunity to capitalize on this insatiable appetite, and the adult entertainment industry became a lucrative source of income for organized crime. However, it's important to note that the mafia's control over the adult entertainment industry wasn't limited to the production of X-rated movies. Stag films, which had been a modest source of income for the mob for years, continued to play a significant role in their operations. These films, often featuring explicit content and catering to specific fetishes, were produced and distributed by the mafia, providing them with a steady stream of revenue. The emergence of X-rated movies in the 70s marked a turning point in the adult entertainment industry. It was a time of unprecedented growth and profitability, fueled in large part by the mafia's involvement. Their control over the production and distribution of these explicit films allowed them to amass immense wealth and power, shaping the industry in ways that few could have imagined. As the 1970s gave way to the 1980s, the landscape of the adult entertainment industry underwent a significant shift. The allure of Southern California beckoned, drawing the porn industry away from the bustling streets of New York City. But even as the industry migrated west, the grip of organized crime remained firm, exerting control over the lucrative world of adult entertainment. According to testimony before the Meese Commission by Captain James Doherty of the LAPD, almost 90% of adult films were being produced in Los Angeles. Chief Daryl Gates went even further, stating that at least 85% of the industry was under the control of organized crime. The mafia had successfully established a stronghold in the heart of the porn industry. The migration to Southern California brought with it a new era of glamour and excess. Pornographers sought to capitalize on the sunny landscapes and the allure of Hollywood, creating a veneer of legitimacy for their explicit productions. But behind the scenes, the mafia's influence loomed large. DiBernardo's connections with the mob allowed him to maintain a tight grip on the industry, ensuring that the profits flowed into the hands of organized crime. He became a powerful force, dictating the direction of the adult entertainment industry and exerting control over the careers of many pornographers. As the profits of the porn industry continued to soar, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, decided it was time to take action. In early 1977, they launched their largest undercover operation to date, codenamed MyPorn. This operation aimed to expose the mafia's involvement in the obscenity-laden world of adult entertainment. After a year of gathering evidence, the agents' hard work paid off. Prosecutors with the Justice Department opened a grand jury investigation, and the evidence provided by Livingston and Olavsky was presented. The MyPorn investigation had successfully exposed the mafia's involvement in the pornography industry. Years have passed, and the mafia is still heavily involved in the U.S. porn industry. Ever since, the pornography businesses have continued to strive, and these crime families have successfully managed to create a degree of credibility in the minds of the American public. So far, there's been no federal investigation targeted at the pornography industry, as the FBI has now confined its attention to just child pornography. While some may see the selling of obscene sexual content as a dirty business, so far, it appears to be a welcome addition to the new global community, and by all indications, will continue to be for a long time. As we take a glimpse at the life of Robert DiBernardo, the mobster who ran the U.S. porn industry, we are faced with the glaring realities of the adult entertainment industry and how organized crime families are the biggest players influencing the industry. If this video was illuminating, click on the cards showing on your screen for more like this.